Los Angeles, Los Angeles, Hollywood, movie stars, celebrities. I think I want to do a series of videos, just whenever I feel like it, about cities. And in a perfect world, I want to just do 10 records from X city, this city, that city. I've already done San Francisco, but that wasn't in this series, but I'm covered San Francisco for the time being until I move maybe in the punk scene later with all my psychedelic shit I've thrown out here to you. This is Los Angeles, and Los Angeles albums, artists. I was gonna say the 10 LA bands that I love the best. I'm doing 20 because I just can't confine 10 bands because LA is such a big music mecca. So it'll be 20 bands. Now, not solo artists, and this is from, obviously it's my point of view. You're watching my friggin' video. So there's not gonna be any Van Halen or Metallica, even though in my mind Metallica's a Bay Area band, but I know they started, I think, in LA. So I didn't follow, I'm not a big heavy metal person, so there's no bands like that. So I picked 20 albums. Maybe there's a bonus if I feel like cheating at the end. And I'm gonna tell you what I'm playing. I should have had it with me, so I'm getting my morning exercise here since I'm not leaving the house during quarantine time up here in Seattle. Actually, Seattle's doing really well with this whole thing. But anyway, this is the second last day of March 2020. Playing Great Little Feat, one of my favorite bands. They are included here. Great LA bands. This is a Rhino box set that came out in 2000, 4 discs, and it's amazing. So, Little Feat, Hot Cakes, and Outtakes. I only picked one album by each artist, and these aren't necessarily my favorite. They're my favorite right now, today, in the moment of these artists. Because obviously, as you know, as we go through them, there's classic records that people like much more. But, you know, in terms of LA and the whole rock and roll scene in LA, you got to start with the Beach Boys. You know, somewhat Laurel Canyon band, the great Beach Boys. I'm picking Surfer Girl, and this is a analog production edition, a mono, which is freaking awesome. It sounds so wonderful. Of course, there's Pet Sounds, that you know, the ultimate album in a lot of ways, but this sold way, way, way more than Pet Sounds initially. Beautiful record. I was not a fan of surf music when I was growing up, so I kind of didn't get into the Beach Boys. I mean, I heard all these songs. The first thing I really bought of myself was the single of Good Vibrations. Now you're talking. They're starting to do some psychedelic stuff, not that wanky Beach Boy thing, but Surfer Girl. I show this record constantly, and I'm showing it again. Fifth Dimension, The Byrds, one of my top 3 favorite bands. Amazing band. Kind of almost rivaled the Beatles at the time, released in 1965 when they came out with Jim McGuinn at the time, Roger McGuinn's jangly 12-string guitar, and those great harmonies and songs by David Crosby, Roger McGuinn, and Gene Clark, and of course Mike Clark rounding out on drums. But this is my favorite of the Byrds albums, Fifth Dimension. A band maybe too soon, too early. They had hits, actually, they had AM hits, but they for some reason seemed to be a little maybe ahead of their time. But that's Buffalo Springfield, the great Buffalo Springfield, Stephen Stills and Neil Young, tempestuous relationship that went on, still goes on in a way, on and off to this day. Dewey Martin, Richie Furay, and Bruce Palmer, and great Buffalo Springfield. You all know Bluebird, for what it's worth, is pretty much an anthem of LA and the riots on Hollywood or Sunset Boulevard. So, you know, LA. I remember going to LA the first time with my parents. We used to take trips down to LA starting around, I'm thinking 61, 62. I could figure it out because in the car on the radio. I remember being in Hollywood. We went through all the sights of Hollywood, went to Disneyland, and I heard that Marilyn Monroe had died. In fact, the next time we went to LA and Disneyland, I heard that Jane Mansfield died. So it's always some woman ingenue actress died on my first few trips to LA. But I love going to LA. I've been LA, God, 100 times, a lot for work, stay down there. It's one of those love-hate relationships I have in Los Angeles. It's a great place to visit, but I wouldn't want to live there. It's a shit show in terms of traffic, but there's some great I mean, it's an amazing city. You can get caught up, and of course the weather is gorgeous. When I first started going, especially when I went on my own, like in the 70s with my buddies, my eyes would burn all the time because of the pollution there. You could see the red skies, but now, well, not now with no one driving, but over recent years with climate control, pollution controls, auto standards, it's really gotten a lot better. Anyway, I love LA. I love LA. See, I'm not including that because I'm not including Randy Newman or Ry Cooder, the actual solo art. It's just bands. Got to do the Mothers of Invention. Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention. Absolutely Free, my very first Mother's album. And I have a whole series of video here I did on Mother's Day a year or two ago. So search it out if you want to see my Mother's Day collection. Kind of related in a way, but probably one of the great pop bands of LA in the mid-60s that had great hits, and a single that I bought and fell in love with was Happy Together by the Turtles. This is a reissue greatest hits album, and it's just what a great group. Flo and Eddie, Howard Kaylan, Mark Bolan would later join the Mothers, and they're on the infamous Mothers at the Fillmore with the famous Mud Shark song. But they were for a while with Frank Zappa touring. But great harmonies. Happy Together is what a great song. She'd Rather Be With Me. It Ain't Me, Babe, the great Bob Dylan song. Did a great version of that. So the Turtles, love these records. Perfect pop records. You can't talk about LA and everything without talking about the Monkees. 1966, I would watch the Monkees every night, 7:30 Monday nights on NBC, I believe. This is their second album, and I love this because I love my band that I had as a kid in 1966 was my first band. We did Steppin' Stone and Mary Mary. But I love I'm a Believer here. One of the great songs written by Neil Diamond. And if you like Neil Diamond, or even if you don't think you like Neil Diamond, get Neil Diamond's Bang Years. I believe there's a vinyl version of it, or a CD. The Bang Years, the early years of Neil Diamond with his version, like Solitary Man, which was a hit. And I think a version of I'm a Believer is on that too. Great record. These monkey shirts, when I was in my band, J.C. Penney's had a line of branded monkey shirts. They were white collars with polka dots and stripes, and I really wanted one for the band. So my buddies and I went down, and my parents, I borrowed money from my parents, if I ever paid it back, and we each bought a monkey shirt for a while. They're pretty mod, groovy shirts. So our bands had these monkey shirts, and it had like a label with a monkeys thing. Had monkeys, more monkeys. So it was tied in with this. Looking back on it, it's one of the first branding things I ever remember in terms of merch related. So pretty smart. The Beatles even weren't that hip. Beatle wigs and all this shit. Brian Epstein sold the rights away and hardly got good money for all that Beatles crap that came out around this time. The Seeds, LA band. I mean, even if nothing else, if they just made that single Pushin' Too Hard, that would be enough. But I have a couple other albums, but this album just is an amazing record. Pushin' Too Hard, Can't Seem to Make Up Your Mind, which opens up the song. Can't Seem to Make You Mine, excuse me. I'm paraphrasing a song with the wrong title to it. But all you psych people know this record. Great record. Includes the hit single. Probably the most popular of all the LA bands forever is The Doors. I'm going with the second album, Strange Days. Again, my band, we did two songs there. We did People Are Strange, and we did, what else did we do? But we didn't do, we try to do the music when the music's over. And starting with a lot of these bands, we learned that we could, we started doing short songs like every band, but then you started hearing bands like The Doors and all these other psychedelic bands, and we realized we could jam for 10 minutes and we could have less songs and do some groovy, wild jams. And I got this fuzz, it was called a boss tone for my guitar. You can Google on eBay, I wish I still had mine, but it was a little box with a volume and a gain control, and it would had a 1/4-inch jack to go in the guitar, then you plug it in. So it was not a foot pedal thing. My buddy had a wah-wah pedal. I never had a wah-wah pedal, but we used to do all these long songs, and we do For What It's Worth, but we would jam for 10 minutes. We would do Big Brother songs. Light is Faster Than Sound from the first Big Brother album with Janis Joplin, and we jammed for a while. So we got into long songs, but definitely the Doors were an inspiration of those long songs. This is a reissue Rhino mono version, really nice. Now, I'm going to admit something about this record. I love this record. One of the great records. It's grown on people. I didn't hear this album back in the day. In fact, I didn't hear this album until about 20 years ago for the first time. I'm saying around maybe 1998 to 2000. For some reason, I sold it. I worked in record stores. No one ever played it, but I fell in love with it finally. It's a unique album. Again, it's one of those albums that wasn't a hit when it came out, but Love Forever Changes. It's gotten to be one of those cult albums. I just saw Rob from the UK, from Manchester, talk about it. He finally got it a few years ago too, and not in love with it. And I totally get that. Is it overrated? Hey, it's only overrated if you don't care for it, but if it works for someone else. But I love this record now. So, LA band, Love. 1968, graduating 8th grade. I remember we actually had an 8th grade graduation, and my friend Danny gave me a gift, and he gave me this record. Chambers Brothers, and I actually saw them at it was called the San Francisco International Pop Festival at the Alameda Fairgrounds, and it was 2 days. His father took us, we were 13, 14 years old. 2 days, it was Creedence Clearwater, Deep Purple, they only had their first album out, the Chambers Brothers. I forgot, I have a brochure I'll show sometime, or a newspaper promo of it. But Time Has Come Today, the 11-minute song, was on the radio. Every once in a while they'd play the long version, but the FM stations that were just kind of popular in '67, KMPX and then KSAN in San Francisco would play that. And I just loved that long version. Such a great song. Time Has Come Today. Soulful, psychedelic. If you don't know, you guys know it. If you don't know it, you should. What's playing now in the background, one of the great LA bands that had a big cult following, had a wonderful following. I saw them once at Winterland. Little Feat, Sailing Shoes. It's got a version of one of the great country songs, road songs, called Willin'. They did two versions of Willin'. I believe there's an acoustic version on their first album and a more electric version on this album. I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari to Hatchet to Tom and Paw, driven every kind of rig that's ever been made. Even took the back road so it wouldn't get weighed. If you give me weed, whites, and wine and show me a sign, and I'll be willing to be moving. Great cover version by Linda Ronstadt. So many people have covered that song. C-Train covered it, but they're kind of an offshoot from Zappa. Lil George kind of played with them a little bit, but they had, what's his name, Roy Estrada, I believe, and some members. So they're part of that LA, clique. Bill Payne, great keyboard player, with the great Neon Parks, who did almost all of their album covers. Their live album, Waiting for Columbus, is one of the best double live albums ever. So if I would say get that album and maybe this album, but all their albums are great. Now, originally from Gainesburg, Florida, but really the band kind of percolated and really grew up in LA. The Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, This is their first album. Of course, I got into them because of American Girl, because it sounded like Roger McGuinn. It sounded like a Birds thing with that jangly guitar, but what a great record. I got to work, I got a job at ABC Records just as their second album, and I pushed the single, Listen to Your Heart, so I got to meet the band and see them play at Winterland, and they saw them at the office and then also at the LA ABC Records office, so big Tom Petty fan, all to the end. This is Willin'. You gotta hear this.
Don't you know that I'm still willing? And I was out on the road late at night. I seen my pretty Alice in every headlight. Alice, Dallas, Alice. And I've been from Tucson to Tucumcari to Hatchapeta to Tonopah, driven every kind of rig that's ever been made, driven the back road so I wouldn't get way.
You didn't expect to see a karaoke thing here.
Weed, white sand wine, and you show me a sign. I'll be willing to be moving.
Okay, one of the schmaltziest, most beautifully produced sounding records, and I'm not going to apologize for showing this record, but Bread, the best of Bread. I want to make it with you, everything I own, baby, I'ma want you, baby, I'ma want you. What the fuck does that mean? Oh man, look what you've done, too much love, down on my knees. This came out when I was working in a record store in 1973. I think we sold this record more than any other friggin' record. And you can get it cheap. But I tell you, if you want a great sounding record, no embarrassment, David Gates is in it, who went on for a solo career. But I'm not embarrassed showing the best of Bread, Elektra Records. And to follow up that album, I don't have a lot of punk things here in this showcase, but this changed things for me too. I used to go down to LA around in the late 70s, and this came out actually in 1980, or it came out. But I think late 70s, early 80s, I would go down to a couple of punk clubs. I remember Madame Wong's was one of them, and I saw X, saw the Blasters, which I'll show you here, a lot of those bands, the Go-Go's, and they used to come to San Francisco, and every time X came to San Francisco, I would see them every single time that I knew about. So I saw them at least a half a dozen times. I actually went to see them in January here in Seattle, and they still sound fucking awesome. So X, this is a great album, Los Angeles, and it opens up with the great song, Your Phone's Off the Hook, But You're Not. Johnny Hit and Run. The World's a Mess, It's in My Kiss, and it's produced by Ray Manzarek, who plays organ. Ray Manzarek, the Doors organ player, but love this record. LA, come on. One of the great bands I don't see a lot of people talking about here on the vinyl community, but Los Lobos, love this band. I've seen them every time. They used to come to San Francisco at the Fillmore. Used to see them in clubs in the late 70s, early 80s probably. From East LA, definitely a Latin band with one white guy, but gorgeous stuff. They have 2 albums all sung in Spanish, but they do a lot of great jammy stuff when you see live. I think I mentioned another video last time, or one time I saw them, they did a great version of the Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows. But this, I think, is my favorite record, How Will the Wolf Survive? Just organically beautiful and really a smart record. produced by T-Bone Burnett and Steve Berlin. So it's got a great sound to it. Los Lobos, When Will the Wolf Survive? They were on Slash Records, which was an LA label that had a lot of sort of the punk stuff. Another of the bands on Slash was the Blasters. I think this is their second album. The first one has that illustration of the blown up face. But I love this record. They became more of a country or like a rockabilly post-punk band. Not even punk really, but they were thrown into that genre because they were out of that time. It's when the artists like Robert Gordon was doing the retro thing, a lot of the 50s kind of Eddie Cochran type stuff. So totally rockabilly, updated rockabilly. And the Alvin brothers, Phil Alvin and Dave Alvin, fronted the band. And they have another typical brothers tempestuous relationship. I don't know why these always come together back to back, but there are, I hate to just put, the Chicks, the two women groups back to back. But the Go-Go's, Our Lips Are Sealed, I saw them several times. We Got the Beat. What a great rock and roll record. This is a powerhouse record, but very commercial in a good way, very poppy. I'm sure you know it. If you don't, you should. Get the first two records. This and Vacation are worth it. And of course, the other chick band from LA, which I actually initially liked more, but now it just depends on the mood I'm in. But they had a lot of hits too. The Bangles, really great sound. The Bangles. It's funny. There's so few women bands that they put them all together since they came out pretty much the same time. So the Bangles and the Go-Go's. The other punk band, Black Flag, really important band. Love this band. This is the first full-on album they did when Henry Rollins joined the group. Damaged, probably one of the best punk albums of all time. Certainly, maybe Vinyl Richie will probably tell me differently, because Vinyl Richie knows more about this, the LA punk scene and the punk scene in general than I do. I was around it, but I think I saw more shows than I bought records. For some reason at that time, I was buying seeing the shows live, but I wasn't really taking it home with me. It's kind of like you date her, you have sex, and you don't bring her home to mom. That sounds really tacky, but I don't know if you know that, how I'm trying to get at with certain music. I didn't feel like put on some of the Thrasher stuff at the time, but now I get in actually I'm more in the mood now playing punk records at home than I was then, but great record, Damaged. And almost lastly, Mark Oliver Everett. One guy, but it's a project. I'm throwing it in the band thing. It's almost solo now as he become. This was the first album under the name The Eels. Mark Oliver Everett had two solo albums under the name E. He goes by E. Tempestuous stuff. But I saw an MTV video on this of Novocaine for the Soul. Surreal, trippy, an amazing song. Listen to that song. And I bought the CD. I had it. Susan's house. Beautiful Freak. This, to me, is my favorite album of theirs, although I have all their albums on CD. I have a few on vinyl, but the Eels, really Mark Oliver and whoever is around, a lot of stuff he does himself and plays. Amazing stuff. It's ironic that also these are very accessible. They're very simple songs in a way, but he adds something in his voice, and a lot of his songs are in soundtracks like Shrek and a lot of DreamWorks movies use songs. So my guess is, as an artist, I saw him twice at the Fillmore in San Francisco. It was great. One of the first shows I took my son to see at the Fillmore in San Francisco, and because he loved this album as well. But he probably made more on DreamWorks soundtrack publishing than he did on selling his own records. But this is a highly recommended record on DreamWorks. Every song on this record is amazing. Really worth checking out. So I'm going to end it there. I'm going to throw in one just for good measure. So 21, the Dream Syndicate. I saw them once at the Warfield Theater in San Francisco, and then they basically split up a few years after that for a few years. I did see them 3 years ago, and they've had 2 new albums. They reformed 2 new albums since. The last 2 are great records. Steve Wynn and his guitar and vocals, but the version on here is The Days of Wine and Roses, When You Smile. John Coltrane on the radio, John Coltrane on the radio. Psychedelic, moody, post-punk, dirgy, in that elongated jammy thing. So they're not a punk band, but they came out of that LA scene that did a lot of jammy stuff. So that's my 20 plus 1 LA bands that I'm picking that I say are the best from my point of view. No metal today, as he loves you.